maybe imagines what we look like on the other side of that. Cleaning up Chernobyl with sunflowers. Sunflowers are hyperaccumulators of dangerous metals. They planted fields of them after the meltdown. I'm sure you can think of some hyperaccumulators of coffee cups, salt and pepper packets, ex-wives, stocks, nuclear arms. Sunflowers like Lesium-137 and Strontium-90. Their roots scour the soil, transport these isotopes up elevator stems into leafy offices to be stored in the vaults of their heads. It's hard to smile thinking about a post-apocalyptic world, but today I do, imagining some future human wearing a biohazard spacesuit, now an Earth suit, with a large sunflower on the breast where you'd expect to find a national flag. He's genetically laden with my plodding gait, carrying a bucket of seeds and a rake, hoping, like all farmers, for warm sun and good rain. This next poem, it's inspired by my son's, I don't want to say overactive imagination, maybe just his perfectly active imagination. So this one's called Fruit Guy. Each morning, my son and I pass an orchard on the way to his preschool, and this morning he asks, "What type of forest is that?" I tell him it's an orchard, a fruit farm. He declares, "Farms have animals." I explain that some farms have fruit, but again he insists that this cannot be true. And because I know better, I ask, who grows the fruit if not a farmer? And my son responds, the fruit guy grows the fruit. And believing I have him cornered, I declare, a fruit guy is a type of farmer. But my son retorts, the fruit guy is a watermelon named Mr. Banana. I am silent, imagining a Humpty Dumpty type watermelon with an unfortunate surname, waking up next to his watermelon wife, donning overalls and straw hat before heading out into his fields with basket and stepladder. And because this is a reality worth escaping into, I let Mr. Banana live. And if you're going to read one about one kid, you got to read one about the other kid. But my daughter's in middle school, and at one point she forbade me from reading this poem, but I think there's an expiration date on that. But if she asks, just don't tell her I read it. It's called Shake Your Tail Feathers. My daughter is sulking in the bathroom because my blue gingerbread man arrived at Candyland before her yellow gingerbread man did. I approach with empathetic intentions for some new-fashioned progressive parenting, but in between sobs, I hear sounds like she's imitating a chicken. Sob, balk, sob, sob, balk, balk, sob. I step away from the door. Her mother isn't home, and this one wasn't in the book. Sniffle, cluck, sniffle, cluck, sniffle, cluck, cluck. I have a vision of her sprouting feathers, and I realize I'm going to have to knock. It's squawk, squawk, giggle, giggle, squawk, flush. When I reluctantly ask about the chicken sounds, she makes beaks with her hands, flaps her elbows, and twists it to the tempo of make-believe accordion music, and tells me that sometimes when she has a sad thought, she makes a chicken noise. Another sad thought, another chicken noise, until she's laughing instead of crying. Holy Zen mother of mindfulness coping mechanisms for emotional regulation. and you might have one or three of these little bodhisattvas at your house. Mine yells, shake your tail feathers, Daddy. And so I do. So growing up, most of my friends' parents were divorced. My parents split up when I was in kindergarten or first grade. So when I went to cohabitate with someone, it was like, I had never seen this work, so it's kind of a poem about that. First-time home buyers. As long as any resident ghost doesn't steal money, hide the remote, or critique my performance in the bedroom, I wouldn't mind him hanging around. Maybe wear a spectral bow tie, serve as dealer when the boys come over for Friday night poker, scare away burglars and trick-or-treaters. We'd have someone to blame for unfamiliar grunts and nocturnal groans of structural indigestion, a soul to not disturb with our disagreements. Eventually, he would need to find a new haunt, but he'd be decent training wheels, show me the trick to the fuse box, location of the water main shut off, how to light the pilot, a few tips on how to keep a woman happy, some suggestions to avoid becoming a solitary fixture in a stubborn old house. This is another relationship poem, like a yin-yang. You once told me that part of my allure was that you knew we wouldn't last. But after the night, we came home kissing across the threshold, and I lifted you onto the counter, and as usual, you left before I awoke. But this time had locked your keys in the car. You didn't expect a guy who needed AA to have AAA. We sat on my stoop, sipping coffee, and laughed about how you thought my solution would involve an old coat hanger, though you were unsure if I owned a coat hanger. And when in 3 months I lost my license, I thought your solution would involve an ultimatum. But instead, you offered to drive me down the Blue Ridge Parkway with its 45-mile-per-hour speed limit and rhododendrons. I joked how 45 miles per hour should be the national limit and asked you to pull over at almost every scenic overlook along the 469 miles of America's favorite drive. I think it was at Craigie Gardens around milepost 364 that I told you how I grew up on a nursery, made 1,000 rhododendron cuttings a season, that rhodos were first classified as roses and are the national flower of Nepal. You said you couldn't picture me as a farm boy and laughed when I said in a husky voice, "That's because I was a nurseryman." I told you there was a Free Tibet bumper sticker on my first truck and got heated describing the ongoing atrocities. You told me to breathe and then taught me to breathe. You told me how you attended 6 schools in 5 years, how you don't have a hometown or a middle name, how you love the homeliness of moss, the way it curates space. We conversed lying like a yin-yang on a road-worn Guatemalan blanket and fell asleep in the shade of a Catawba rhododendron as a nectarine sunset juiced the Appalachian Mountains. They're older than Saturn rings and earthly bone. You stayed long enough to see my court clothes become my work clothes. And this is my, everybody should have one, 1950s nuclear family giraffe poem. Hardworking stiff. On the back of the Archer's Exteriors van that advertises full service, windows, roofing, and siding, there's a cartoon giraffe with a tool belt and hard hat who uses a word bubble to tell me that no job is too tall. But instead of imagining my house with an easily financed facelift, the image provokes me to envision a world in which giraffes have taken our evolutionary path, where running across uncivilized savanna is history, taught in a high-ceiling classroom. Yes, a world where giraffes slurp Wawa coffee with those 2-foot tongues before donning reflective safety vests, the fear of a lioness in the bushes replaced by a dip in the Dow Jones. I see this lanky foreman coming home after a long day of tall jobs, checking the mail, a couple of bills and a catalog advertising, a collection of scarves for the sophisticated mammal, addressed to his wife, who will soon reach her long neck down the basement stairs to retrieve a bag of acai leaves from the chest freezer and begin defrosting them for dinner. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the times you most need flowers, it's usually like when the flower shop is closed. You know? But there's a flower shop in my town that solved this problem, and I'm very appreciative. And this is a poem about that. After hours flowers, fresh cut and tightly bundled with leftover ribbon, set out by the highway in a 10-gallon bucket, half filled with hose water, $5 scrawled across the front, padlock money box. These are after hours flowers, doghouse roses, home late with whiskey breath bouquets, forgotten anniversaries, mother-in-law troubles. Men struggle in the dark to decide which bunch bears the fragrance of forgiveness. So this is, I'm very excited to be reading at Stockton and for the Stockton, or the Stephen Dunn reading series, because Stockton changed the course of my life at least twice, maybe more. But the first was when I dropped out of the University of Massachusetts and found a soft place to land here at Stockton. And Stockton's probably the only place that a kind of lost sociology, anthropology major could take a class with Stephen Dunn and with our guru here, Peter, and something writings that I've kept up, ever since. So, and then a few years ago, I was really burnt out at my job as a social worker, and Stockton gave me the opportunity to teach, and I started teaching here and taught for 2 years, and that really opened up a whole new career path. So this poem was written just a little bit before I quit that job, I wrote this at my desk, so this is a time theft poem. But don't tell them. 19 years of education culminating in a good job. As they sit watching the hours tick at a good job, a secure job, a health benefits, pension, vacation time, sick day job, I think about my preschool graduation and how the whole class was asked to say what they wanted to be when they grew up, and how it felt like there were only so many options: firefighter, doctor, farmer, teacher, salesman, athlete, scientist. And then one girl said proudly, as the teacher cringed, that she wanted to be a dolphin. I think about her often, and I really hope she became one. And this poem is from I didn't get very far with the series, but it's a series of poems about some gnomes that I imagine live in my neighborhood. This one's called "The Neighborhood Gnomes Apply for Homeschool Accreditation." The towering evaluator was welcomed into the garden by a stout, rosy-cheeked matriarch who was quickly informed her homeschool curriculum did not meet minimum academic standards. The pencil-skirted specialist contended that gardening was not a supplement for earth science, and that playing pan flute on a toadstool was not sufficient for music education. She concluded mending a bluebird's wing would not qualify as anatomy, and examining tree rings did not meet the benchmarks for world history. The stern-faced woman did seem struck by the craftsmanship of the children's geometric birdhouses, but made clear there was nothing Common Core about them. When asked about language arts, the father proudly trotted out their middle child in green peak cap and braids, who seamlessly recited, "When I heard the learned astronomer." The assessor tapped her clipboard with a red pen, seemingly unimpressed, and reminded the beaming would-be educators that the state's syllabus specifically recommended students study Song of Myself. And this, I used to think I was a pretty wild guy, but it seems like I'm only getting wilder. And so this poem is called Wild. The rugs haven't been cut in so long, the shag is up to my neck, which is sometimes how I feel navigating the jungle of my life, which germinated from the garden of my childhood and went untended for the first 30 years or so. It's been some time since I backpacked through nightclubs, traversed the landscape of closing time, tossed the map on a mushroom trip. Right now I'm deadheading petunias on my back deck. My children, who convinced me to spend the afternoon attending a birthday party for an inchworm named Spike, are sleeping. The dog is chasing lightning bugs. My wife is finishing a glass of rosé and will soon be waiting for me in our bed. Earlier today, I added boat-tailed grackle to my backyard bird list. My zucchini is starting to flower, and so for the first time is the southern magnolia I planted a few strings back. Big Orange, our designated groundhog, is on his hind legs, taking in the evening news. And as the sun moves to give someone else a term of the light, I consider that this might be the wildest I've ever been. No, I'm gonna read one more. I didn't read anything from Roadside Attraction, but it's back there. You can check it out. But these are, I tried to read some parenting, more domestic poems that kind of go along with the themes today. I have ADHD, and one of my more endearing symptoms is that I misplace things, lose things, leave things places. And a coping mechanism, I won't say it's an effective coping mechanism, but it's blaming it on supernatural phenomenon, So this one's called Toast Ghost. My mind often and quite suddenly takes the stairs, two at a time, to a study located somewhere between my frontal lobe and cerebral cortex. I like to imagine there's an oriental rug and a collection of billiard pipes, walnut bookshelves, and a turquoise reading chair with brass studs. Here I'll recall 2 bats I saw the other night and think about the variations of mammals and find myself pondering platypuses as muscle memory continues with the mundane task at hand. When I return to my programming, I go to put 2 pieces of bread in the toaster and find 2 cold pieces of toast. I alert my family, no one claims them. Toast Ghost. This is not the first visit we've had from this phantom, who has become part of our family mythology. A Jersey devil will spook us even when our pine barrens no longer share an address. This spirit that connects the 4 of us in ways we are connected to no one else. One day, when I've retired from my body to that county library in the sky, and my children have toasters in their own homes, they'll know I've come for a visit when they arrive with 2 floppy pieces of hopefully split-top wheat bread, and find 2 slices of toast still waiting to be buttered and jammed. Thank you.